Hi, my name is Momita Roy Chaudhary, and I'm an instructor with the Homer Watson House and Gallery since 2020. I started teaching online classes through the Homer Watson House and Gallery when the pandemic hit, and I've been teaching ever since. I like to teach watercolors and ink and wash, also pastels, soft pastels. So I do a lot of landscape painting, painting portraits, painting pets, animals, florals. So these are some of my favorite themes to paint. So today I will be doing a small demo to show one of my watercolor florals. It's winter season, so I'll be doing a poinsettia. So I want to show a few of my art pieces. I do a lot of different things. I do things like florals, like this one here, and I also do scenes from city life and urban life, like this one. It's a cityscape. I also like to do a lot of landscape, especially in and around Kitchener-Waterloo region. It's so beautiful here. So pieces like these are winter landscapes. So I would be doing a few winter landscapes pretty soon, winter landscape classes. I also like doing some recipe art like this here. So these are pictures from a recipe book, and I have done some classes where we paint with ink and watercolors to create some traditional recipes and new recipes and capturing them in our sketchbooks. I love to do a different variety of medium, and soft pastels is also one of my favorites. I also do a lot of different kinds of art, including murals, which are large scale. So I have also been invited to paint the bench here at the Homer Watson House and Gallery last year, which I did, which was one of my own interpretation of a Homer Watson painting. And I also did a lot of murals all across the Kitchener-Waterloo region, and I love doing a variety of art. So today I will be doing a demo for a poinsettia, or a few poinsettias actually. So I am going to do a watercolor drawing, a watercolor painting of the poinsettias. So I've got a piece of watercolor paper here, and I try to tape it down to my table or to a board here, so that it's kind of fixed and it's easy to work with. So I will be drawing out the poinsettias at first. So what I will be doing is creating a very light drawing of the poinsettias, and I do a light drawing because in watercolors are transparent. So if you do a very dark drawing, it will show through your page. Now, whenever I do florals or even landscapes, I try not to paint the main focal point right in the middle of the page. It creates a sense of more interest when the viewer's eyes are drawn to the painting. So if you create it a little to the left or the right of the page, so I'm trying not to do it right in the center here. So it's a little to my left, and you'll see that when I do the other poinsettias, it would be a little on the sides, not exactly in the center. Now, as I start to paint, I will probably build out a few more leaf shapes there, so that will gradually progress as I start to paint. Now, when I start to paint, I'm going to use something called negative painting technique. And a negative painting technique means that you start from the lightest and gradually build the darkest by painting around the objects. So I'm doing kind of a diagonal section here of the yellow. It's almost like the light hitting from the top left to the bottom right here. Now I also try to mix some red with my phthalo blue so that I can create some purples. So these purples I will need later on when I'm building out the darkest shapes. So this is the first step in creating the first wash. So I'll just stick to the basic red, yellow and green here. You can also apply a little bit of blue because we have not used the blue on its own here. So I'll add a little more blue here. So we have to give this a little bit of time to dry, and then we can start to build some of the next few layers. I often use a hair dryer for this process, and it really dries the paper really fast. So using the hair dryer, now this has dried, and now we can go ahead and do a few more layers on this. So what I would do is, first of all, I would try to paint around the petals. I would try to create a lighter color by painting everything else around it darker. So that's how the negative painting technique works. Now when I start doing that, I'll also paint the actual subject itself, but at the same time I will also paint around it. So let's start with a section here on the right side. Now I don't want everything to be red here, so I'll kind of blend it with other colors. So I need the purple with my red here, and I'm going gradually darker in there. So I'll add some purple. So this is going to be a really bright purple. Now when I'm doing this, it might look like I'm covering up what was already done, but in reality, it's going to cover up only a little section and not everything else. So when I go upwards, I know that I need to show the light coming in from the top left. So I would not be covering it up entirely, and I'm going to lighten my colors as I go upward. So if I'm using reds here, darker reds here, I would lighten them up as I go upwards. So I'm trying to create more leaf shapes as I'm going towards the right here, and it's not restricted to the drawing that I made, because every time I'm adding some colors, I'm also trying to create shapes and add more variety here. So all these blank areas that I'm leaving out, they can definitely so these shapes, they can definitely begin to look like some more leaves in the background. So as they go into the background, the flower would kind of pop up. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. So I'm mixing more blue here because I want to go darker on these sides. So if I make the two diagonally opposite sides darker, and then there is a light that's running from the top left to the bottom right here. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm adding some darks now. So the background is kind of covered with all the three colors that we're using. Now, while the background dries, we can start to paint the petals. Now, the petals won't be as light as what we have done right now in the first wash. So I would aim to use a smaller brush right now with a pointed tip, so that I can have more control. So the bigger brushes give you less control and help create a much looser painting, while the smaller brushes give you more control and you can do the finer details. So as we progress from the beginning of the painting towards the end, we start with the biggest brush and then gradually move on to the smaller brushes. So as a starter, I would start doing all these yellow shapes in the center. Now for each of these petals, I'll need to create a yellow and red combination as a starter. So if we are painting something that's red, I do not directly go into a red. I start with a yellow and build up an orange and then move on to the reds, so that it's a gradual transition. So here I'll start by using an orange. The yellow is already here. So if I were to start painting this, I will put my orange here. Now I will keep doing the same on most of the petals. Now the petals which are in the path of the light need to be a little lighter. So for those, I'll be using more yellows and less red. So some of these petals I don't want to cover up. I want them to have the nice yellow that we have from the first wash. So I'll just use some yellows and very light oranges on one of the sides and not cover up entirely. So if you end up adding a lot of darker colors, you can also pick up some paint. So use a dry brush, or what we call as a thirsty brush, which is very dry, and then just lift out the paint and keep wiping on your paper towel so that it's a little more dry. For some of the petals which are kind of a little beneath the other petals, I might use a darker red. So I'll go in with the red without mixing any of the yellows here. So whenever I put down a color, I try to mix it with another color so that it looks interesting. But if you over mix it, it kind of gets a little muddy sometimes. So the best way is to mix it right on paper. So just the way I did yellow and then the red from the other side, it keeps the colors looking fresh. If you try to mix it on your palette too much, then it becomes a little muddy sometimes. So there are some gaps here, and I'll use some dark greens and dark blues to bring that out. So whenever you have two petals next to each other, there's going to be a little bit of bleeding. So you might want to do alternate petals or wait for a little longer so that it dries up a little more. And as I move into the darkness on these corners, the petals and the leaves, those would need to be much darker. So instead of just doing the reds, we now can add the blue and the yellow together to get to the darker greens and even some purples. So here I'll use the blue and a little bit of red. So they would kind of combine on paper to create a purple. So as I'm moving from the corners on these two sides, which are darker, towards the lighter side, which is here in the center, the petals of the flowers and the leaves, those would be much lighter. So for example, the leaves here would be more of the yellows, and I can also leave out some white space to show the light. So I'm leaving some white areas as well, just like I did for the top left here. Now I'm doing some leaf shapes here, and because these are underneath the petals, I try to start with a slightly darker green here, and then gradually as I move outwards, I lighten them up by adding some yellows. So here, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go gradually darker because this corner needs to be darker. But if I do it right away, then it would be a big contrast versus the light and the dark. So I'm trying to get to the dark gradually instead of just in one single stroke. So eventually these leaves would be kind of pushed to the back by adding darker colors. So whenever I'm adding darker colors, they're kind of getting pushed to the back. And when I'm adding lighter colors, they're in the forefront. So here, I also do a few petals here. So these are again in the path of light. So we'll start with some yellows. So I added some darker reds. So as I'm going towards the section where there is more light, I'm trying not to cover up everything and leave out some white areas. Now this petal here is more in the dark area, so I'll start with a red and I'll gradually use purples. I'll also use some more darker reds on some of the other petals here. So for example here, these two petals have blended a little bit, so I need to define some of these petals. So I'll be using some darker reds. And sometimes you can leave out some sections like veins in the centers of these. So I'm trying to bring out some of the petals by painting the edges, which are right next to other petals here. So this one can be a little bit darker because it's in the darker area. So I'm trying to bring more darkness on these two sides now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a few more petals. They don't need to be restricted to the only petals that you have painted here. So you can create some shapes even if you have not drawn them before. And I'm trying to make it darker and darker. Now to get this center looking lighter, I'm going to add blue and dark red in the center. So this is going to define the petals now. So this would be for all the corners. So we will let this dry a little bit. There is too much water here. Then we will define the corner here. So here, wherever it's dry, we can define the corners and we can paint around this round shapes in the center. Define them. And I'm using a combination of greens, reds and blues which do not have a lot of pigment, which do not have a lot of water on them. It's more of the pigment there. So for every petal, we can just go underneath the existing ones on the top and make them a little bit dark. Now when I do the same thing on this one here, it's a little bit lighter on the bottom side here, so you can use a light wash of red. Since I'm doing a smaller section here, I'll switch to a smaller brush. So the bigger brush also picks up a lot of water. So when you're doing a small section, a small brush will not pick up as much water. So it's more convenient to work with that. Now I'm adding some yellows so that we can show the light in this section here and not make every petal dark. So whatever is getting pushed into the darkness, I need some of these little light. So I will just paint with yellow. Keep some of the dark areas there. These leaves are kind of lighter and underneath the petals they need to be a little more dark. So I will add some darks there. It can be a darker shade of green. And as this section is darker blue, so I'm trying to go from the green into the blue here. Again the center I'm going to use the blue. So just painting around the lighter shades that we created in the first one. Since this leaf is right underneath the petal, now these appear to be big sections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of darker green here, and we can do a vein. So we can keep a section running through the center that's lighter. All these edges we can make them pop up even better by adding some darks around them and then gradually just blending it outwards. So now is the time to fix in some of the areas where the colors might have flown into each other, but at the same time we don't want it to be too dark, so that it's still in harmony with the background. So we can mix it with some of the other colors that we are using. So if we are using a blue, right next to the blue we can add some reds or greens. We can keep glazing until we have the right contrast build up. And for the lower sections you can do the same thing, but you can put a light green or an orange for that. So this part is really light and I want the light to be focused on this side, so I'll make this one a little bit darker. So once everything is done, try and take a fresh lid so that you can fix some of these areas if they need to be darker or lighter. So this is good for Christmas card even if you do a smaller scale of this, and it really looks bright because of all the colors that we have used, and it brings out the light and darkness in this painting, and it's a good idea as a painting as well as a greeting card for this season.